humans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kubernetes for Humans podcast. Today, with me in the show, we have Mirko. Mirko, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Mirko. I'm co-founder and CEO of dash0. Before that, I was co-founder and CEO of Instana, and both are observability companies where dash0 is now very much focused on open telemetry and open standards.
Yeah, so happy to have you on the show. To be honest, we also recorded an episode live on KubeCon, but because of technical glitches, the episode disappeared. And we're doing like a re-recording, so it's going to be like a very nice and special episode and super interesting. It was very important for me to do this recording because I think you have a very interesting story. So maybe let's start with the beginning, right? Like maybe share a bit about your background, where did you came, and maybe a bit about the start of Instana.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm basically a classical software engineer. I studied computer science, programmed. I love programming. Then I founded my first company, which was a consultant business in Germany, Code-centric. Grew it to 500 people over 10 years. And then decided that I want to build software and founded Instana in 2015, which was at that time APM for microservices. Because this is about Kubernetes, we essentially at the beginning of Kubernetes around 2015 saw that there is a demand for a different type of application performance management. Today we say observability solution, which deals better with the containers, with microservices, the interactions, has a different set of understanding of events. And so we did that. I did it for 5 years, venture capital backed. And then we sold to IBM. And then I said, I will never work again. I will never do a startup again. I will never do anything in observability again, and had a 3-year break. Yeah, and then and we can talk about that. But a year and a half ago, I really got bored, and I got excited about the space again, and I saw what OpenTelemetry has done in the years, and so I decided to start with some colleagues dash0, an OpenTelemetry-native observability solution, and yeah, we released the product basically at KubeCon where we met, and now we are a month in.
Okay, no, like a super interesting story. So let's maybe do like a bit of a focus on the Instana phase. Then let's talk about your like 3 years like resting, and then we'll move to the present. And I will say that when Commodore like was founded like 5 years ago, we took a lot of inspiration from you guys because Instana, unlike most APMs, it felt that it was built for a microservice like world, like in its UI, in the easiness of installation, while traditional APMs, app dynamics, and so on, were very heavy and felt very enterprises, right? Like, and that is the customer base in the end of the day. Instana felt like the new kid on the block. So we took like a lot of inspiration internally in Commodore from a lot of your stuff. Maybe you can share a bit about maybe like both the first day of Instana and then you can, go over like the
Yeah,
journey until you were like bought by Instana, which I will say we also had like Chris Bailey, which is now the CTO of Instana in like one of our episodes. So like it's a full circle here. So yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Chris is a great guy. Let's start by what's different, right? It's exactly what you said. The classical APM vendors, the agent that you installed to get the data were pretty heavyweight, right? Which didn't really matter if you have a monolithic application in large, I don't know, WebSphere application server with which already is super big. But when you run, I don't know, in the Java world, little Spring Boot applications, and you start them up in containers, then I don't know, for a JVM with 100 megabytes of memory or something, you don't want to put in an agent that requires 500 megabytes, right? And we essentially developed an agent that is super small footprint. We called it sensors. So basically decoupled the communication layer from the ingestion layer. And we had auto discovery because containers also come and go, as you know, right? Kubernetes can just say, oh, I spin up a new container. And then you want that to be instrumented automatically and detected in real time. So we implemented real-timeness. We implemented auto-discovery to inject the things automatically into the containers. And that was the core technology behind Instana, right? And we built a UI, if you know the little boxes, right, on the infrastructure map that basically helped you understand how your Kubernetes environment, how your application stack looks like in real time, and how things are connected, and gave you insights into problems. Yeah, that was the basic idea, and that's what we built. And it's technically challenging, especially on the agent side, and of course also processing a lot of data and stuff. But that's kind of a fixed problem. And yeah, that's what we built. And we started, and we were focused on Kubernetes customers. Had really good traction at the beginning. So I don't know, it took a year to build the first initial product. Then we started going out in 2016, and we were really on that high growth track, right? Double, triple, right?
Okay.
Thing. And yeah, then during COVID, IBM reached out, and yeah, the rest is history. We sold.
How was, like, I'm interested because APM always feels to me like a very, like, maybe red ocean. Maybe now it's more than it used to be, but in the end of the day, you have a lot of vendors, right? Like Datadog is the most dominant and successful one by far right now. Even I'm not sure if that was the case back then. And everyone does claim at least to do pretty much the same, right? Like the traces, the logs, and the metrics. So how did you guys different, like, between one another? And is it really that hard? Like, does existing customers move to Instana back then, or it was mainly like people who didn't had any APM, like bought Instana as the first APM? Maybe you can share a bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, we have to go back to first to 2015. And in 2015, Datadog did not have APM. Datadog started basically as a metric solution, right? So they did metrics for the cloud, for AWS mainly, and they had nice dashboards. Then they bought a company, I don't know which year, a Logmatic, a French company,
Yeah.
which and they added logs to the stack. And then they started building tracing, right? So they got into the APN space. But when we founded Instana, the world was still pretty divided, right? You had the Splunks of the world, they did logging. You had the Datadogs, which did infrastructure monitoring. And then you had the APM vendors like Dynatrace, AppDynamics at the time, the leading two APM vendors, and then us, Instana, focusing on Kubernetes. What then
Perfect.
happened, and that was also a challenge for us, is that those categories merged, right? Splunk bought SignalFX, they bought
Perfect.
Omnition to get metrics and tracing to their logs. So Splunk built a platform. As I said, Datadog bought Logmatic, and then they built out metrics. Dynatrace added logs and other things. So the vendors started merging these categories together. And at the same time, this observability topic came out. And I know that the honeycomb people don't like it if you say it's logs, metrics, and traces, but essentially that's what happened, right? Observability is now the new word for those categories in one tool, right? That's kind of what happened. And it was challenging for us as a startup because when we started, we had a clear differentiator. We were APN for microservices and Kubernetes, and we were competing with AppDynamics and Dynatrace, and they had this heavyweight agent. But then we also had to build the other tools, right? We at the beginning, we partnered, you probably know the CoreLogics guys, also in Israel. So we partnered with them because they only had logging at the time. And we took them as a logging tool. But then today they also added everything else, right?
Yeah, they have
So
everything as well. Like everyone is doing everything.
every time everyone is doing everything. And so back to your question, yes, it's definitely red ocean. And when I started dash0, I was asking myself, oh, do I want to get into that competitive market? But now what I've learned in the meanwhile, I've done so many investments in different categories. There are pros and cons about getting into a red ocean market.
Mhm.
The pro is there is a market,
Yeah. Yeah.
and people know what it is, and there is a category, there are budgets already, and it's more competition, but it's also a huge market, like $50 billion market. So there's always a chance. I always say to my team, if we get 1% of the $50 billion market, we have 500 million revenue, right?
Yeah.
That's not bad. So So the thing is that in a large red ocean market, you still have chances to get into the niche, make a lot of money. Where when you have a blue ocean market, you have to evangelize, right? There's
Yeah.
no budgets. People don't know the category. I mean, probably with platform engineering, you have seen that, right? That
No, no,
you have
I totally agree.
you
Like getting a
you
budget line from a customer who didn't like he's already paying Datadog $2 million, right? And then, for example,
exactly.
Commodore, which really helps to simplify Kubernetes, but in the end of the day, it doesn't have a budget line, Commodore or Kubernetes management or Kubernetes troubleshooting, and then he needs to invent it. And people don't like to pay money. In the end of the day, like it's something that, like, in order to create a new category, you need to work really hard on the evangelism. So
Exactly.
so let's talk a bit about, you sold Instana, right? Like you can say the amount, you can not say the amount, but then you are free to do whatever you want, right? So what did you do like between
Yeah.
between now and
Yeah,
then?
there are some press reviews that say $500 million was the sales price, and it's not that wrong, right? I can't say the clear amount, but it's somewhere around that. So
Okay.
uh, for us, it was a really good exit, and I stayed for a few months. Then I left, and then I first did nothing, right? I was tired. 5 6 years of building a startup is really like you say, oh, now I can lie at the beach, right? And that's what I did. But then you also figure out, oh, it's kind of boring, right? You can't, or you start to drink too much alcohol, right? so so you need to do something, right? And also I have a family with 3 kids. They go to school, and you can't do whatever you want, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
started different things. I started a restaurant. I started wine bars. A brewery, a co-working space in my city. So I did different things,
Yeah.
and I also did a lot of angel investment. I did around 80 angel investments, all in basically the category of infrastructure, software, SaaS business. I helped a few founders, got on board. Yeah,
Who
that's,
who
and
is
so
the
I
best
thought that
invest? Who is your like the top three investment?
top three investments. I had a really good one because, and I think they're also out of Tel Aviv. It's called Granulate,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that was one of my first investments. And I got in, and they sold for a really good price pretty quickly to Intel, which,
Yeah.
as an angel investor, that's a nice thing to do, right? But I have a lot of really interesting ones um, that I don't want to take out someone out of this, but there are very different paths. But what I learned, if I can give you a learning of doing 80 early stage investments, it's really about the founders. It's not so much about the product, the category. If it's very early stage, because you can't really judge. I've seen really exciting product with bad teams, and that will never go anywhere. But I have seen like products that you think, I'm not sure. But if it's a world-class team, they will figure it out, right? They will pivot, they will change, they will listen to customers, they will do the right things. So my learning is invest into the right people, right? Then, especially early stage, that is what works.
What did you learn about wine bars and restaurants? What can you share like the audience on those topics?
The first thing I learned is that you cannot apply anything you learned in startups and our business to restaurants,
Oof.
because the main difference is it's very low margin.
Yeah, the margin.
It's very different business, right? So we when you have venture capital, right, we go to a KubeCon show and we build a booth, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars. And you can't do that in a restaurant, right? I mean, you will never get your money back, right? So you have to really calculate. You have to make sure. And the other thing is that you have a very short feedback cycle, which I love. I mean, your guests basically, if you do a bad job, if the food is not good or the service is not good, they will tell you immediately, right? Or you get a 1 star on Google or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really direct feedback. It's a hard job. Saturday, Sunday evenings, you work pretty hard, but it's also rewarding, right? It's a nice category, but it's, especially in Germany, it's very hard to make money with it, right? It's not something you will become rich if you do a restaurant, right? It's more a lifestyle thing.
So for like all of our listeners that are thinking about opening one, like probably not the
Think
best idea,
twice.
unless you already sold your company for a couple of hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's like a good tip of advice. And maybe like share about like why opening a new startup. Maybe now let's focus a bit on what you are currently doing, why, how, who, and yeah.
I mean, the first thing is probably coming to the conclusion that you want to do another startup, right? And that for me was a process over the 3 years, right? I figured out, to be honest, that I'm not really good at being an advisor, um, especially not for myself, because I get very nervous pretty quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
then I mean, as an advisor, you're outside, right? You're like the coach, you're not on the field. And I'm more a player, right? I love to do things. And so I figured out that advisor role is not what really satisfies me and what I want to do. And also investing is pretty hard because in our business, when you do something, you said, hey, you were at KubeCon, then you get leads and you can follow up the leads. So you see the result pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In the business of investing, you see the results 5-7 years later, right? And that's also very hard for me because I like this quick feedback cycle. So I figured out that investing is not what I want to do. So I knew I want to be operational again. I want to build a team. I want to build a product. So then it was about what I want to build. Yeah, and I saw that, I don't know. I love the space, right? I love observability. I get excited. I know the space pretty well. I know I had a really good team, so I wanted to bring the team together again. So I decided to go into observability again. And the chance that I've seen is that this new standard, OpenTelemetry, which is standardizing the way you get the data, right? What I said, the agents basically are now standardized. There's an API, there's a standard for the date format. So that's pretty cool because it's democratizing the data part. And so I saw that there's an opportunity to build something that's really natively supporting OpenTelemetry. And not only that, we also support things like PromQL for querying or Perseus for dashboards. So we want to be as standardized as possible so that the customer does not have the lock-in problem anymore, right? Today, if you use Datadog, you have the Datadog agents, you have maybe configured 100 dashboards in Datadog, you have configured 100 alerts. It is really hard to move, right? Because you can't take the dashboards and run them in another tool. But if you are based on standards, like you can take your alerts with you because they are in standard format. You can take the dashboards with you because they are in standard format. You can leave the agents. You just have to pinpoint the OpenTelemetry collector to a different tool and it
Yeah.
will work right away, right? So it's your investment is just safe and also your learnings. And so I thought this is really a great opportunity to build something that's 100% compatible with those standards.
No, it's interesting. I know that, like Datadog, for example, released, I think, vector.dev, right? Vector.dev. So, like, how do they play along? Like, in the end of the day, APM, unlike 7, 8 years ago, is like a very re- like well understood category with existing players, and like you said, $50 billion like market. So how are the other players like playing with OpenTelemetry? How do you
Yeah.
different from them? Like, yeah,
I think Vector was also an acquisition, and there
yeah.
is a whole I think there is a whole category
Mm-hmm.
which is called these observability pipelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Basically, the big gorilla there is Cribble, right?
But
And what those vendors did is they basically tried to solve the problem that I just described, that there are multiple agents and multiple backends, and you can't really send
Mhm.
data from, I don't know, Splunk to, I don't know, Prometheus or something like that. So you put something in the middle, which is like a queuing system, and then you can transform the data. You can send it to different backends. You can remove data. You can enrich data, and that's these pipelines. That's what Vector also does, right?
Mhm.
And I think the product is now called Observability Pipelines in Datadog.
All
And
right.
but on the open telemetry side, I think the main difference between somebody who's open telemetry native and somebody who's supporting open telemetry is that if you support it, we did the same at Instana. That means you integrate the data. You take open telemetry, probably with your agent, and then you convert it into your internal data model.
Uh-huh.
Because that's how your tool works, right? You have your data model, you have your semantic convention, etc. And then you basically lose the open telemetry part of the data. So what
Uh-huh.
we said is, no, we will not do that. Our whole system is based on open telemetry. So the backend in dash0 is based on open telemetry. Our semantic convention is based on the open telemetry semantic convention. The tagging is the same. So when you set open telemetry in natively, you can also get it out. Everything you see in the tool is open telemetry based. So it's not, it's a different approach, right? And it is hard for a vendor, as again, I was in that shoe. If you have already done all the work, you have your data model, you have your UI, you have your
Yeah.
things. Maybe you have even more than the current standard supports. It is very hard to support it. You can just integrate the data, but it's hard to support it natively. And that's the main difference.
So let me ask you like two follow-ups. Based on what you are saying, everything is standard, right? Like, and that's what you guys are building. So why should they choose you guys, right? Like, let's say that there's a lot of
Yep.
like open telemetry, standards. Everyone is like collecting the same data. You don't invent the data. You are saying you are not the one doing the pipelines, right? And even the dashboard you are saying are quite standard. So what is your edge in like this kind of space, or like who is going to win?
Yeah, good question. I think, and that's kind of the very interesting part. If it's not anymore about the data,
Mm-hmm.
I think the winning factors will be what you do with the data, right? And one of the challenges of observability is that you get, I mean, especially in these Kubernetes environments, you get more and more data, more metrics, more spans, more logs. And so I think the vendors will compete on who does the best job for the developer, for the SRE, for the platform engineer to give them the insights that they want
Mm-hmm.
in an easy way, right? So you will compete on the user experience. And by the way, for me, AI is part of the user experience, right? I think really good AI, I always like to compare it with Apple. In Apple products, the AI is somewhere, right? You make a photo, but you can copy the text out of the photo easily. That's actually AI, but they don't name it AI. It's just a feature that's pretty cool and it works. And so this is how we see it, right? AI should make it very easy to correlate things, to find problems, to visualize them, and to make it easy for you to get the data, right? Group them, reduce them, and that's user experience. Also make like we have full keyboard support. It's super fast, super slick UI. So we try to make the user experience as easy and slick as possible. And then there's another point, and I think if you talk to Datadog customers, they will tell you, as an
Yeah.
example, that's the cost part.
Yeah.
And the cost part has two things. One is it expensive or not? And that's a discussion I don't want to blame anyone and say, hey, this is too expensive. I mean, if somebody pays, as you said, $2 million for Datadog, kudos to Datadog, because that also means they provide so much value that somebody pays $2 million for it, right? So that's I wouldn't say that's something bad if you can pay if you pay a lot of dollars for a product, right? That just means they did a good job. What I don't like and what customers don't like is the transparency. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens with most vendors is they say, "Oh, I charge you for, I don't know, 1 GB of logs, $2." And then you send something in, and at the end of the month, you say, "Oh, you got $40,000 for so many," but you have no idea where
Yeah.
that data
No,
came from and
I don't.
why, right?
I don't think I met one Datadog customers that understand this billion, including we, like in Commodore ourselves. We really like Datadog, and we also pay them quite a lot of money. But I never know what's going to be my billing in the end of the month, and it's one of the trickiest things. They have so many sections and so many different, like they're very notorious, known for
Uh,
again.
I'm I'm just opening a new opportunity in my CRM, right? No, but it's exactly the issue we hear a lot, right?
No,
It's like the
no,
transparency.
I think it's a real pain point. The thing about Datadog is that the product is good. Like we are paying Datadog, like you said, because you are getting a lot of value in return. And it is hard for organization to do the switch because your developers are already used to it, right? And the alerts are already like that. And then you need to do a migration. And I think I had an interesting conversation once with the folks in CoreLogics, and they told me that they, when sometimes like Datadog customers move to them, it can take like a lot of time, right, to do the migration. It can be like 6 months just to do the migration, and it's also money, right? Like it's not that like a little dwarf is doing it for you. Like you need to work super hard on making it happen.
No,
So
absolutely. I totally agree. That's why I say it's not that easy, right? People,
um,
it's a good
uh,
tool, but the frustration on the transparency is basically there, right? And that's also something we want to basically fix. Not necessarily say, hey, you have to switch or something, but the market is just so big that there
yeah,
is a lot of opportunity in there.
there is. Well, one question, I talked in the conference in KubeCon with the Morgan McLean, I think from like Splunk, who is one of the open telemetry like contributor or creators even, and he told me a very similar story to you, how Splunk is like leveraging open telemetry. Do you see big companies starting to say things that you're saying, like that everything should be open telemetry? Like, is it a trend? Like in a couple of years, is everyone going to be super open telemetry like adopted for
Yeah,
competitive?
I mean, I like that. We basically started as the first, we said we are open telemetry native observability. And when I came ComputeCom, I walked past the Splunk booth and it said big open telemetry native observability. Then I walked by Elastic booth and it said open telemetry first observability, right? So it seemed like the message is resonating. And I see that as a really good sign, because what does it mean? Nobody changes it if there's no demand. And they have thousands of customers probably. That
Yep.
means that they get those requests from the market. And I think that's the answer to your question. I really think that the market will shift to open telemetry because the benefits are just too
Mm.
obvious, right? No
Yeah.
lock-in, also very transparent, good agents, which are developed by the community, more secure, right? And so I don't think that. Oh, and also it's integrated in a lot of things, right? It's integrated in Kubernetes. It's integrated in platforms
Uh,
like Vercel or in the clouds.
like it already won. Like I feel that now it's only a question of like how how much time will it take to be like
Exactly. So I see it the same. It already won. It will take probably a lot of time, like
uh,
always with standards, right? It takes time until it's adopted. But I think it's the winner, and it's we always say it's the last agent you will install, right?
this move?
Because it's now the standard agent, and that's a benefit. And so that's why they are jumping on that
Uh-huh. Telemetry
path, right?
train.
And
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I can't tell you if Splunk and how good Splunk and Elastic
Yeah.
will support in the future. I can tell you what they do today, and that's not OpenTelemetry native, but they probably will do a good job. It's the same when we started with Instana 2015. We were basically the only one who could really do Kubernetes APM, but the other vendors catched up, right? It takes 2 or 3 years, and then
Yeah.
everyone could do Kubernetes, right? And I think that's the same here. I think over the next years, you will see more and more open telemetry native solutions, really open telemetry native solutions. But then again, it's with every starter, right? We have to be faster, we have to be better, we have to support it quicker and in a nice way. So it's a good competitive market. I actually like it.
Okay, no, that is super super cool. Okay, like I think we're out of time. And Mirko, like maybe like a prediction, or what does the future have in store? What do you want to tell us and to our like listeners?
I think, I mean, this very obvious, right? After KubeCon, we also internally spoke. What are the two main topics at KubeCon? I think for me, there were two main topics. One is platform engineering.
Yeah.
Like if you look back, there was DevOps first, then there was like SREs, and now everybody talks about platform engineering. And I think platform engineering will also have an impact on observability, right?
Mhm.
How you do it, how it's integrated with platforms, how people will use it, how it's provided to the end users, self-service, etc. So that's one trend which will impact. And the other is AI, right?
Yeah.
And for us, that means, and we already see that with our customers, every application will have an LLM somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And LLMs will be observed differently, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to build observability for LLMs, but you also have to integrate them into your tool to provide better user experience, right? That's the trends that I'm seeing. I think it's nothing revolutionary here or new that if you are in the space, you can see it. But that's actually the trend. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds super cool. So thank you a lot for doing this episode the second time. I hope this recording won't get lost in the mail. And pleasure, I know. We are going to see you in the next KubeCon over London?
Absolutely. We are platinum sponsors this time.
Budget. In the rest of the world, we put them for. Like, no return on investment. Pleasure, Mirko.
Thank you.
Kubernetes for humans.